Peter Sutcliffe, a name forever etched in the annals of criminal history, became synonymous with terror in the 1970s Britain. He was better known as the Yorkshire Ripper, a moniker that sent chills down the spines of those living in northern England. Sutcliffe's reign of brutality left a trail of fear, pain, and unanswered questions. This essay delves into the chilling story of Peter Sutcliffe, exploring his crimes, the investigation that led to his capture, and the lasting impact on his victims and the public psyche. Sutcliffe preyed on women, often sex workers, subjecting them to horrific violence. His weapon of choice was often a hammer, used with chilling ferocity. The brutality of his attacks, coupled with the seemingly random nature of his victims, created a climate of fear and uncertainty. The Yorkshire Ripper case became one of the largest and most complex investigations in British criminal history. Despite the challenges, the investigation eventually led to Sutcliffe's arrest in 1981. His trial and subsequent conviction brought a sense of relief to a nation held captive by fear. Born in 1946 in West Yorkshire, Peter Sutcliffe's early life provided no obvious clues to the darkness that would consume him. He was the eldest of 6 children, raised in a working-class family. Outwardly, Sutcliffe appeared to be an unremarkable child. He was quiet and kept to himself, showing no outward signs of the violence that would come to define him. Sutcliffe left school at the age of 15, taking on a series of menial jobs. He worked as a gravedigger, a factory worker, and eventually a lorry driver. Despite his unremarkable facade, there were hints of darkness lurking beneath the surface. Sutcliffe developed a fascination with voyeurism, spying on women in their homes. This disturbing behavior marked the beginning of his descent into depravity. In the late 1960s, Peter Sutcliffe began to act on his violent impulses. His first known attack was in 1969, when he assaulted a woman with a sock filled with a brick. The woman survived, and Sutcliffe, fearing exposure, did not attack again for several years. However, the encounter had awakened a monster within him. His dark urges resurfaced with a vengeance in the mid-1970s. He began targeting women in the red-light districts of Leeds and Bradford, using hammers and knives to brutalize his victims. The brutality of Sutcliffe's attacks shocked even the most hardened detectives. As the body count rose, so did the fear that gripped the region. Women were afraid to walk alone at night. The Yorkshire Ripper's modus operandi was as terrifying as it was effective. He stalked his victims in the darkness, often targeting women who were alone and vulnerable. His attacks were swift and brutal, leaving little time for his victims to defend themselves. Sutcliffe often used a hammer to inflict blunt force trauma to the head, rendering his victims unconscious before stabbing them repeatedly. He struck in Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, and Manchester, leaving a trail of terror across the region. The seemingly random nature of his attacks only added to the fear, as no one knew who would be next. The police investigation, while extensive, struggled to keep pace with the Ripper's reign of terror. Sutcliffe's seemingly normal life and lack of a criminal record also made him an unlikely suspect. The manhunt for the Yorkshire Ripper was one of the largest and most complex investigations in British criminal history. The police were under immense pressure to apprehend the perpetrator. However, the investigation was plagued by challenges from the outset. The lack of a centralized database for criminal records hindered information sharing between different police forces. This lack of coordination allowed Sutcliffe to move freely between different areas, avoiding detection. The sheer volume of information received by the police also proved to be a double-edged sword. While tips from the public were crucial, they also created an overwhelming amount of data that needed to be processed and analyzed. Adding to the complexity of the case was the media frenzy surrounding it. The investigation into the Yorkshire Ripper case was hampered by a series of false leads and missed opportunities. One of the most significant setbacks occurred when the police received a series of letters and audio tapes, purportedly from the killer. The letters, written in a distinctive handwriting and containing chilling taunts, led the police to believe they were dealing with a perpetrator from Sunderland, a city in northeast England. This belief prompted the police to focus their efforts on the Sunderland area, diverting resources away from the real killer's location. The audio tape, in which a man with a distinct Sunderland accent taunted the lead investigator, further solidified the police's belief that they were closing in on the Ripper. However, the letters and tapes were later revealed to be a cruel hoax, orchestrated by a man named John Humble. In a stroke of luck, Peter Sutcliffe's reign of terror came to an end in January 1981. He was apprehended by 2 police officers in Sheffield, not for murder, but for driving a car with false number plates. During a routine check at the police station, one of the officers noticed that Sutcliffe matched the description of the Yorkshire Ripper. Further investigation revealed that Sutcliffe had been interviewed by the police on several occasions during the investigation, but had been ruled out as a suspect. Under interrogation, Sutcliffe confessed to being the Yorkshire Ripper, providing chilling details of his crimes. He admitted to attacking 13 women, killing 12 of them. Sutcliffe's confession sent shockwaves through the nation and brought a sense of relief to a community living in fear for years. In the name of justice, trial and sentencing of a killer. Peter Sutcliffe's trial began in May 1981 at the Old Bailey in London. The trial was a media sensation, with journalists and members of the public from all over the country flocking to the courtroom to catch a glimpse of the man who had terrorized Yorkshire for years. Sutcliffe's defense team attempted to portray him as a man suffering from diminished responsibility, claiming he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and heard voices from God instructing him to kill. However, the prosecution argued that Sutcliffe's actions were premeditated and that he was fully aware of the nature of his crimes. After a 6-week trial, the jury rejected Sutcliffe's plea of diminished responsibility, finding him guilty of 13 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he serve a minimum of 30 years. The judge, Mr. Justice Boreham, described Sutcliffe as a beast and an evil man and stated that he should never be released from prison. Life behind bars, imprisonment and deteriorating health. Following his conviction, Peter Sutcliffe was imprisoned in Parkhurst Prison, a high-security facility on the Isle of Wight. He spent the next 3 decades of his life incarcerated, his every move watched by prison guards. In 1984, Sutcliffe was attacked by a fellow inmate who stabbed him in the eye with a pen. The attack left Sutcliffe partially blind in one eye. Despite the attack, Sutcliffe was deemed mentally fit to serve his sentence in a mainstream prison. Over the years, Sutcliffe's physical and mental health deteriorated. He was diagnosed with diabetes and heart disease and suffered several heart attacks. The legacy of fear, impact on victims and public perception. The legacy of Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, extends far beyond his life behind bars. His crimes left an indelible mark on the families of his victims, the communities he terrorized, and the public perception of safety and justice. For the families of Sutcliffe's victims, the pain of their loss was compounded by the brutal nature of the crimes and the years of uncertainty and fear that preceded his capture. Many families felt that the police investigation had been mishandled and that their loved ones had been failed by the system that was supposed to protect them. The Yorkshire Ripper case also had a profound impact on public perception. It shattered the illusion of safety, particularly for women, and highlighted the very real dangers lurking in society's shadows. The case sparked debates about police procedures, the portrayal of violence against women in the media, and the treatment of sex workers. Death of a monster. Sutcliffe's demise and lingering shadow. On November 13, 2020, Peter Sutcliffe died at the age of 74. He had been transferred from prison to the University Hospital of North Durham after testing positive for COVID-19. Sutcliffe, who had a history of heart problems and diabetes, reportedly refused treatment for the virus. Some, particularly the families of his victims, felt a sense of relief that the man who had caused them so much pain was finally gone. While Sutcliffe's physical presence may be gone, the shadow of his crimes continues to linger. The Yorkshire Ripper case remains a chilling reminder of the importance of vigilance, the need for effective law enforcement, and the enduring impact of trauma on individuals and communities. Despite the passage of time, the scars left by Sutcliffe's reign of terror are still felt today, a testament to the enduring power of fear and the human cost of violence.